marker. What is going on, my beautiful LARPers and LARPettes? Today we're gonna go over this foldy boy, the Keltec Sub 2000 Gen 3, and directly compare it to the Keltec Sub 2000 Gen 2. And what sets the Gen 3 apart from the Gen 2 are some pretty significant upgrades. Before I get into all that though, what is my relationship with Keltec themselves? So they did send this one out to me for review, but this original Gen 2 Sub 2000 here, I did purchase myself. And if you haven't already seen my video on the Keltec Sub 2000, just scroll down my videos there, and I think I titled the video, "Why the hell did I buy this gun?" or something like that, but it was a genuine question at the time where I kind of just looked in the back of my safe and forgot that I had this guy and asked myself, why the hell did I buy this folding thing here? So go ahead and check that video out if you're curious on why I even bought this in the first place. Now to get right into the features here, and hopefully I can fit both of these into frame while I'm describing them both, but they're pretty long, but they're not too heavy, so I'm gonna just kind of pick one up at a time. But starting with the Gen 3, you get no metal front sight right here. You don't get any built-in backup sights whatsoever in this one compared to the Gen 2. You can see at the front of that guy, you have a iron sight there, and you have a plastic rear sight here that kind of folds into the gun itself like that. I kind of like that design just because it does tuck away really nice in the rear, but they completely done away with it on the Gen 3. Again, I like to have backup sights on my guns. I could just put a backup, I could just move this optic forward and put a backup sight here and one in the front there. So you can have some iron backup sights, but I think it kind of look kind of funky. But you know what? Just get yourself a good red dot or something like that and call it a day. But no backup sights on this one, but you do get a 1/2x28 threaded 16-inch 9mm barrel, as well as you do on the original Gen 2 here. I have a little HB Industries like comp flash hider thing at the front there that makes it look like it's a part of the gun, but I'm most likely gonna suppress this guy here when it's folded away. Moving on to the rail, the pick rail on top and the bottom and the M-lock slots on the left and right are basically identical to the Sub 2000 Gen 2. I can't really tell a difference on these two whatsoever. I do have a little Strike Industries grip here. I do have an Enforce light up front, and I have a Holosun red dot in the back there with a Strike Industries riser there. Getting into the way it folds, it basically folds identical to the Sub 2000 Gen 2. You just flip this lever forward there and pull up, basically snapping this thing in half. It's kind of like you're gonna snap a twig in half, right? Just and you're good to go. Hopefully that wasn't too loud. And then the way you deploy this one here, the Gen 2, is there's a little tab back here that you have to pull away from you and just fold it back into place. The biggest difference that you're going to see on the way the Gen 3 folds is the way you deploy it is with this button back here now, and you open and you have to twist, rotate this barrel assembly basically, and then it clicks down like the Gen 2. And the way you basically stow it is you push that lever forward like the Gen 2, then you can either rotate it to the right or the left, and it will lock into place on the last M-lock slot right there at the front. So you can just choose to stow it that way or flip it around and stow it this way, which I think is a very, very, very cool feature to now have with the Gen 3. That's probably the biggest reason people were buying all the upgrades for the Gen 2, because there was no way to mount an optic on there from the factory unless you bought the Macarbo upgrades that go to this, or there were some other upgrades that kind of allow you to get the optic and move it out of the way so that way you can fold it. So the Gen 2, when you fold it say you put an optic on there, kind of like how I have this Gen 3 there, it will literally just stop right there. It won't close all the way because there's no way to rotate it out of the way. So you just have to buy an upgrade that moves it out of the way, but that causes some other issues. I don't have those upgrades with me, but just to explain them, because I do have buddies that do have them, and I was kind of on the fence about them. I really like that it moves the optic out of the way, but I don't like that I have to kind of move the charging handle back and stow it with this rope and then put the optic under. There was also another option from, I believe, M Carbo that kind of just keeps it on the side here, which I think is pretty cool, but I'll also get into why that might be an issue if you have that upgrade or you even have the Gen 3. But moving on from the way it folds, you're gonna see some subtle differences on the actual receiver portion here. So at the ejection port area, you no longer have like a big piece of plastic ejection port cover on the Gen 2. I don't know if you can see that right there. Hopefully I can get some better photos for you. It is now open, so when you are stowing this at a certain point, if you have like an optic mount that has like maybe a screw-on thing or something like that, it won't get in the way, so it's gonna allow you to close it on either side. So it's not going to get in your way with that ejection plastic part popping out. I did notice on the ejection port area though, there are some marks from the brass deflecting off of there. It is chewing away at that plastic a little bit. Don't know long term what that's going to do. Maybe it'll cut so much plastic out of there that it just rubs itself smooth where it's not going to have any problems. But I just don't like the fact that it's chewing away at plastic right there. So hopefully I don't have issues in the future. You guys out there that have the Gen 3, have you seen any issues with that chipping away right there? Like I said earlier, you have the same exact lever, but you do have a different grip. The grip is shorter, which I do not like. I prefer a larger grip. I'm guessing they did this just because they wanted to keep everything slimline. So if you pay attention to that grip and stock there, it's kind of at the same length there. And I guess they're trying to cut the actual footprint of this, right? So when you're stowing it in a bag, you're gonna have less things sticking out on you. But with those things sticking out, again, I'll get into that in a second. But on the Gen 2, you have essentially a Glock 17 size grip here, which makes it really, I don't want to point this towards myself. It just feels weird having a barrel almost towards your face. So I gotta fold this out every time I want to show it off. But Glock 17 grip right there lets my pinky rest nice and comfortably. I don't like the fact that this is just my pinky's hanging off of that guy. So for two things, I just like to have more material there. But when it comes to reloads, that meat of my hand there, it does snag when I am inserting a magazine. So I kind of have to, damn it, man, I don't want to flag myself with this thing. The magazine will sometimes catch onto the meat of my hand if I'm not moving it out of the way. So yeah, so do I sacrifice the footprint for that issue of the reloads, or just personal preference of me having a full grip? Or do I just deal with it and just say, hey, you know what, this is not really a super serious tactical, whatever the hell you want to call it, the home defense gun or whatever. This is more of a, to me, a backpack gun, and I explained that in my other video of the Gen 2. Now moving on from the grip, everything else is essentially the same, where you have your same mag release, you have your same safety, but the other difference that you're going to see here, which is to me a major upgrade as well, is the trigger. The trigger is now aluminum compared to the plastic trigger on this one. And they also put a lighter spring kit, and I don't know what else they did to this trigger, but this is leaps and bounds better than the Sub 2000 Gen 2. This one is like, I don't know how to explain it. This is just cheap feeling and heavy, and doesn't really, it's not really predictable, so it's not really my favorite trigger. And that's another upgrade that a lot of people do to their sub 2000 Gen 2s. But the Gen 3 is 100%, let me double check that, is 100% lighter, smoother, and more crisp on that brake and reset. I don't know how to explain it, but they did a very good job on this trigger here compared to the stock trigger on the Gen 2. Now moving on back to the charging handle on the Gen 3, it is bigger than the Gen 2, little skinny guy there. And the biggest thing here when it comes to the charging of this thing is the spring is a lot easier to bring back and charge on this Gen 3 here compared to the Gen 2. The Gen 2, you can't have little baby skinny arms like me when you're charging it. It's just extremely hard. I have to do it with my right hand. There you go. And there you see that it locked to the right. That is the only way to lock the Gen 2. On the Gen 3, you can lock it on the left or the right side. Now to me, that's a really cool feature as well, just because when I was doing reloads out there, I kind of have this whole MP5 slap going on now. So when I insert the magazine, I just go directly to the back and smack that down. Again, if you are a lefty, you can go ahead and do that same thing on this side. I also believe that they upgraded the buffer kit on the inside, but as per YouTube's stupid guidelines, I can't pull anything apart anymore or show you guys. I don't even know if I could show parts and pieces or anything like that, but I don't want to get my account shut down. So there are some upgrades going on the inside. Stock is pretty much the same. You still have 3 positions on here. Just remove this pin and move it back however you want. The biggest thing here is going to be that push button. So on the Gen 2, like I said, you have a little lever that you pull upward. This one is now a push button that you push down to unlock it. Now that pretty much does it for the sub 2000 Gen 3 features. It is leaps and bounds better as far as upgrades, and basically Keltec has listened to all the issues that people were having with the Gen 2 and just made a Gen 3 out of it. So that way you don't have to buy any upgrades for this thing here. The Gen 3 just has a lot more going on for, I don't even know what the Gen 2s are going for, but these are going for around, I think I seen them on guns.com or something like that for like $416 or $420, and then like on Gun Broker or Sportsman's for like $440. So they're extremely cheap still. And comparing it to a sub 2000 Gen 2, where you're probably paying the same price plus the upgrades, it's going to be a hell of a lot cheaper to just go straight to the Gen 3. But let's get into the biggest downside I see to the Gen 3 still. And I don't know how much you can fix this, just because there's no way to go around it unless you get those other upgrades where it moves the optic below, but that also still moves, gives you some other problems. So you're stowing it like this, right? But you still have a footprint on the left and the right side. So depending on what attachments you're putting on here, you're still going to have, I guess, some issues sticking this into a backpack and having these pieces kind of bulging out on you in the backpack or wherever you're stowing it. If you're going to try to stow it on your truck or something like that, or underneath the seat or something, you're going to have some awkward angle to put this in, just because the optics and the grip or whatever you're going to put on there, lasers or lights, they're going to get in the way. On the Gen 2, you didn't really have that luxury of having the optic there, just because it didn't rotate, and you had to kind of orient your light to M-lock slot maybe, and it'll still be bulging out a little bit. But on the Gen 2, if you did get an upgraded optic mount that sat underneath, you still had a very thin profile. The biggest issue there is you did have to have your charging handle back and out of the way and held in by like a tether there, so that way it doesn't come forward on you and get stuck to the optic. So the slim profiling compared to the Gen 2 and having all the attachments on the Gen 3, the Gen 2 is still super, super thin. I guess you can get away with that on the Gen 3 if you just take the attachments off, but you're going down to now not having any backup iron sights on the Gen 3. So if I took off this grip, this light, and this optic, I don't have any way to aim on this thing. As opposed to keeping the Gen 2 stock, I do have at least backup iron sights that I can use to aim. And I guess from there, if I just didn't want to deal with attachments, I could just still get those upgrades of that bigger charging handle, better trigger, and better springs on this. But then you're running into the issue again where you're paying a lot more than what this needs to be when you have the Gen 3. So I'm not gonna sit here and say that the Gen 3 is a incomplete gun just because it's still gonna have some bulk to it. I do have to give credits where credit is due to Keltec, where they're actually listening to everybody and fixing those problems and not hiking up that price a ridiculous amount for all of these upgrades. So is it just me that's just complaining about this bulk on the left or right? Should I figure out other options on maybe getting a what is it, those angle foregrips where it doesn't stick out as much, and maybe a lower riser where I can have less to snag on? Or is there another way that Keltec can kind of rotate this out of the way? I don't really know. You guys let me know in the comments down below how you like the Gen 3. I think now that this is out, you shouldn't even consider the Gen 2 anymore. You should just go straight to this and figure out what attachments you're gonna put on this to make it fit your backpack or your needs or your truck or whatever it is. I think I'm gonna retire my Sub 2000 Gen 2 as my, I don't know, I guess I kind of had that as a end of the world apocalypse gun that I could just store somewhere in a truck or in a backpack or in a bug out bag or a get home bag and just forget about it, you know, just store it in there and never even touch it again until something bad happens. So I feel like this is gonna take that place of the Gen 2 and just sit in a bag or in a truck or something like that. At least you're getting 15 rounds or an extendo on there with a 16-inch barrel on there, so you get that good velocity and a high round count out of this thing. And it does take Glock mag, so if you're already carrying a Glock, you have that luxury as well. Maybe we can convince Keltec to make one of these in 10 mil or something like that, so that way I can have it as a maybe a more backpack worthy bear gun or something. I don't know. I'm just kind of doing what Keltec does and throwing ideas out there and trying to make them come to life. So what do you guys think about the Keltec Sub 2000 Gen 3? Is it a gimmick to you? Is it something that's you can just stow somewhere like I do? Or is it something that you should really take seriously when it comes to having a foldy boy backpack or shit hits the fan gun? Thank you guys so much for sticking around. I really appreciate you. Love you all. Catch you in the next one.